Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Back on our Revelation sermon topic this morning, and this is the one that everybody has been waiting for. This is the big one, the mark of the beast, 666. All the beasts of the land and sea are starting to appear in our text. So we'll get right after things this morning, but just for a brief review, that we have been studying the historical context of the book of Revelation and also using a preterist interpretation, saying that some of these things may be yet to come. And using both of these interpretive lenses, we have been examining the work of John of Patmos, who was probably Christ's apostle, who is writing at a time of great persecution during the Roman Empire, probably in the 90s AD under the Emperor Domitian. And throughout his text, he is something of a priest or an archbishop within modern-day Turkey, Asia Minor, where he is giving instruction to 7 churches in Asia Minor. And he is continuously telling people to keep a pure and robust faith, that in the midst of persecution, that everything is going to be okay, because Christ is going to win in the end. And throughout this text, there is also confirmations of the Old and New Covenants, that the New Covenant is fulfilling the Old Covenants that we see throughout the Old Testament. That we see an image in heaven of a lamb who is worthy to open a scroll with 7 seals, which is the will of God, that the Son of God is the lamb that was slain and has the authority to then open the scrolls of the new covenant for the coming judgments upon the earth. That we meet 144,000 people, which represent Israel. That the old covenant is sealed, and then a great multitude, all who take the mark of God on their foreheads and their right hands. And this is the confirmations of the new and old covenants. We then see an angel carrying a golden censer with much incense in it that represents the prayers of the saints. That they are bringing the prayers of the saints to the altar of God in heaven, and that God is getting ready to deal out some judgment. And then we looked at the 7 trumpets of wrath, which are a series of really bad judgments upon the earth, that those who do not have the mark of God are in trouble. Then we met an angel and a little scroll, which is a giant angel standing on the land and the sea, and he eats a scroll, or he gets John the prophet to eat a scroll, which symbolizes John's new prophetic status, that he's the prophet of the new covenant, like the prophets of the Old Testament and of the Old Covenant. And then finally the heavenly temple is opened up, and that we see something happening in heaven, that there's been judgments, but now John is revealing more to us. And we always need to keep in mind that in Revelation, that the old and new covenants are continuously reaffirmed, that John is saying that the Old Testament the old covenants of the Old Testament are fulfilled in the new covenant. So when we see God's temple opened up, we immediately have this vision. Right at the end of chapter 11, we have this vision of the Ark of the Covenant coming out of the heavenly temple. Not the earthly temple in Jerusalem, but the heavenly temple. And when it is opened up and you see the Ark of the Covenant, immediately at the beginning of chapter 12, there is a portent that John says appears in heaven, which is a vision, an icon, an image of a woman with the moon under her feet. Now, what is going on with this? Why is the moon under her feet? So this is a very highly technical point. And the great philosopher, scientist Aristotle came up with the ancient physics that was used until the time of the Enlightenment. So for thousands of years, they used Aristotle's theory of physics, and he had 2 theories of physics, not like Newtonian physics, that all laws of motion are governed by the same laws, whether you are in space or whether you are on Earth. Aristotle had sublunar, which is under the moon, and superlunar laws of motion, which when you have superlunar mechanics, it is perfection. that there's nothing that impedes progress. So by this image of this woman standing on the moon, it means that she is perfect. So this portent in heaven, then John goes on to describe this woman. She is pregnant and she is bearing a child. So this is the Ark of the New Covenant, not the Ark of the Old Covenant. And it has a major double meaning here for us, in that the woman equals Israel and also the Blessed Virgin Mary. And then the child that she bears is both the church and Jesus. Well, Jesus who creates the church. So there is a double meaning here. And then immediately there is another portent in heaven. Right? There's another grand vision that explodes in heaven. So it is revealed then that a red dragon comes about. And this is exactly what it is. This is the devil, Satan himself, shows up. So keeping in mind that throughout the Old Testament, Satan is among the heavenly court. He's really the prosecuting attorney of God in most cases. Think of Job. He's simply trying the faith of the people of earth. But here Satan appears as a dragon. He is the arch enemy of the new covenant. And he is trying to destroy the child. So he's trying to destroy Jesus initially. Think of the gospel story of where Herod, perhaps inspired by Satan, was trying to murder Jesus immediately, and the Holy Family has to flee to Egypt. But also he is trying to destroy Israel. He's trying to destroy the new faith. He's trying to destroy the covenant of the new church through the Roman Empire. And when he's doing this, it shows that in the text that a war breaks out in heaven between the forces of the dragon and the forces of good. So this is where we get the imagery of the fall of Satan and his rebel angels. It says the dragon swung his tail in the sky and a third of the stars fell out of the sky. Well, of course, stars can represent bishops, they can represent priests, they can represent angels, the stars have a multitude of meanings within apocalyptic literature. But in this case, it is the angels that side with the great red dragon. And it's not exactly clear what time that this happens temporally, but it seems that it probably happens during the time of the formation of the new covenant. But it's really unclear when Satan is defeated by the archangel Michael and the forces of heaven and cast from heaven onto the earth or into the bottomless pit. And then in chapter 13, at the conclusion of this great heavenly war, we meet the first beast of Revelation, which comes straight out of Daniel. So John is confirming this imagery out of the Old Testament, right? He's saying that the prophets of old predicted this, but he's also saying that this is something that is part of our world, right? This is the confirmation of the old. And I am saying it again as the prophet of the New Testament that ate the little scroll. So he says, I saw a sea beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. So the sea, again, I've said this before, the sea always represents non-Israelite nations or peoples, right? These are Gentiles. And think of the Roman legions coming up out of the sea onto the promised land in Israel, right? That this is the imagery of a sea beast, right? Something that is coming from out of the Mediterranean Sea onto the land of Israel. And 7 heads, 10 horns. So heads with crowns on them, 7 Roman emperors from the time of Augustus Caesar to the time of Domitian. And then we see 10 principalities, major principalities within the Roman Empire. So 10 horns, symbols of power, symbols of princes, principalities are areas governed by, in the Roman provinces, right? Principalities, provinces, governed by the Roman emperors. 7 heads, 10 horns, Rome, folks. So the dragon, it says, gives the beast its power and authority. So this is meaning that to John, the Roman Empire is an evil empire, right? Think of Star Wars and the Emperor Palpatine. This is the evil empire to John because it is persecuting the church and Christians. And it also says, the text, that one head has received a mortal wound, but it had been healed. And there's a legend that the most atrocious Emperor Nero, who instituted the first persecution of Christians in the 60s AD, that he used Christians as garden lanterns. He would set them on fire in his garden and do just atrocious things to people. But Nero it was thought that he died in the late 60s AD. But there was sort of this legend that he would come back from the dead because emperors were semi-divine figures. And one of the heads in the text has received this mortal wound. So there is something of a belief that Nero, when persecutions happened, he had come back and was the emperor of Rome, right? This is not something, this is not a relationship where we can see the president on Twitter that the emperor is a very distant figure far away. People did not know what he looked like, where he was, the intricacies of imperial politics usually. The legend of Nero. So keep Nero in your minds. He is extremely important in this text. So then this beast, right, the sea beast, was allowed to make war against the saints and to conquer them. In 13:10 it says, "Let anyone who has an ear listen. If you are to be taken captive, into captivity you must go. If you will kill with the sword you must be killed." Here is a call for the endurance of the faith of the saints. So John is saying, keep the faith even in the midst of this dire persecution of a Domitian or of a Nero. That this beast, this beastly empire, this evil, dark empire led by Satan is persecuting you. But keep the faith. You have to keep the faith. Do not fight with the sword because you will be killed by the sword. Endure with the faith is the message. So then we see a second beast, a land beast. Now, like the sea representing Gentile peoples, non-Israelites, the land beast a land beast is going to also represent peoples. But in this case, it is peoples of the land. Think of the promised land. And this beast had two horns like the lamb. Right? Think of the lamb earlier in the text, right? The lamb that was slain. But it spoke like a dragon. So it has the horns of authority of the church, but it speaks like the dragon, like Satan, the devil, the enemy. So there was a priesthood of the false prophet. This is the imperial cult that emperors from the time right after Augustus, he is deified. This is some 100 years before the text of Revelation. Emperors become semi-divine figures, and therefore they have priesthoods that come about. And so this beast is representing this imperial priesthood within Israel, within Jerusalem. I think of the end of the Gospel of Matthew where the chief priest says, "We have no king but Caesar," when Christ is claiming to be the king of Israel and the king of the new church, right? God himself, the Messiah. We have no king but Caesar, right? That it is important that you keep the peace between Caesar and the Israelites, right? So we see here a priesthood of the false prophet, the imperial cult priesthood. Because this second beast has the horns of the church, but he speaks like a dragon, right? So he looks very svelte, and he's part of the church, but the second beast is in reality just as evil as the first beast. And the second beast, of course, exercises all the authority of the first beast, right? They work hand and hand. Now, the beast, it says, the beast that comes out, this beast that comes out of the sea. It has a name, John says. This is I'm reading straight from the text. The name of the beast, or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a person, and its number is 666. So in ancient languages, letters are equivalent to numbers. So we call this numerology. So in the event that you have Latin, you see here C would equal 100, V 5, and I would equal 1. So letters equate numbers. And so John is saying that this beast has a name, and it has a number. And its number is 666. So when you spell out Caesar Nero in Hebrew, that it spells its number is 666 when you add up all the letters of Caesar Nero. So it is testifying to this imperial persona, that this is the mark of the beast. When you take the number of the beast on your mind and your hands, when you do the work of the beast, this is taking the mark of the beast. It's not literally having it branded on your hand or your head or something of that nature, but like the mark of God that we saw with the sealing of the 144,000 and the great multitude in heaven, the beast is the same. That you are doing the work. You are accepting the work of the beast. You are doing the work of the world and not of God. You have taken the mark of the beast in your heart when you have accepted this number. So then in chapter 14, here comes the cavalry, folks. We see an image of Christ standing on Mount Zion, which is Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, and he has with him the 144,000, the old heroes of Israel, the saints of old, and the great multitude, all who were sealed with the mark of God. So all the people of the new and old covenants that were pure and blameless have been brought together with Christ, and they stand on the Temple Mount in opposition to the beast. And then we have the testimony of 3 angels that fly out of heaven. And the first testifies to the authority of the gospel, the law of the new covenant. Not the law of the old covenant, but this is the new law of the covenant, the gospels of Jesus Christ. Then there is a second angel that testifies to God's coming judgment upon the world. Those who have taken the mark of the beast and do the work of the world, there is coming judgment from heaven because of this. And then finally, there's a third angel that says, those who worship the beast and its image and receive the mark on their foreheads and their hands will drink the wine of God's wrath. So here's just an exclamation that if you have taken the mark of the beast, right? If you do the work with your hands and you have accepted it in your mind and in your heart, that you are going to taste God's wrath. You will not be among the elect standing on Mount Zion. Rather, you will be facing the wrath of God because you are an enemy of God at that point. You are not doing the will of God. You are doing the will of the world. And in 14, 12, and 13, chapter 14, verses 12 and 13, we see this beautiful imagery here. John calls for fortitude among the persecuted Christians again. He says, this is beautiful imagery. Here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and hold fast to the faith of Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, write this, blessed are the dead who from now on die in the Lord. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them. That's some beautiful imagery, folks. I think sometimes we live in this brutal, nasty world. We see war, we see catastrophic change, we see anarchy, we see chaos, we see awful things happening everywhere around us, people at each other's throats constantly. We have a continuous struggle against each other, seemingly. We see rioting, pillaging, there is disease among us sweeping across our world. But I think through the midst of all this chaos, through all this terribleness, that we have to cling to this image, that we endure for the faith. We don't do it with the sword, we don't do it with anger or malice in our hearts. And we are going to face adversity as Christians. We will face this again and again and again. Revelation echoes this. We are going to face adversity. But the prophet of the new covenant calls upon us. He says, "Blessed are those who die in the Lord, for their deeds follow them." Your deeds will follow you. That when you take the mark of God, or when you take the mark of the world, the beast, your deeds are going to follow you. And you may taste God's wrath, or you may be among the elect standing on Mount Zion with the white rider. This is the eternal message of endurance for the faith. We must keep the faith when it isn't easy. We are going to struggle, but at the end of it all, we will receive a heavenly reward if you keep the faith, for your deeds follow you. What is in your heart, what is in your mind, is in the work of your hands. So do the work of God and keep the faith. Amen. So next week, folks, we're going to look at chapters 16 through 18. So in the meantime, stay healthy, stay safe, and God bless.